Welcome to the Horror Mansion, a place where every shadow hides a story, and every door leads to fear.
The late 1960s. It was an era of profound contradiction, a time of seismic change, a time of cultural revolution. In Northern California, the summer of love was still a fresh, fragrant memory. It was an explosion of color, music, and idealism. A generation was challenging the old ways, convinced they could build a new world founded on peace and love. Flower power was more than a slogan, it was a philosophy. Peace signs filled the streets of San Francisco, a symbol of hope against the backdrop of a divisive war in Vietnam. But beneath this vibrant surface, the optimism was fragile. The nation was already wounded, reeling from political assassinations and social unrest. And into this fractured landscape, a new and uniquely personal darkness was beginning to fester. It started quietly, almost unnoticed. A deep, unsettling fear started to creep into the hearts of ordinary people living in the sleepy towns north of the bay. It was a fear that would soon have a name, a symbol, and a chilling, taunting voice. The carefree spirit of a generation was about to be shattered, not by a distant war or a political movement, but by a series of brutal, senseless acts of violence that would leave a permanent scar on the American psyche. A shadow fell over the Bay Area, not a physical shadow, but one cast by a phantom, a ghost who hunted in the dark. This phantom moved silently through the night, turning the innocent rituals of youth into a hunting ground. He targeted young couples in quiet, secluded spots, the kinds of places where teenagers went for a moment of privacy. Lovers' lanes, once places of whispered secrets and romance, became scenes of unimaginable horror. The first strike came just before Christmas, 1968, on a desolate stretch of Lake Herman Road. Two high school students, out on their first date, were executed in cold blood. The attacks were sudden, savage, and utterly baffling to law enforcement. There was no robbery, no clear motive at all, just a trail of shell casings and shattered lives. 7 months later, he struck again, this time at Blue Rock Springs Park. Another young couple, another lover's lane, but this time there was a survivor, and the killer made his first contact, calling the police from a nearby payphone to report his own crime. Panic began to spread like wildfire. Who was this monster? Why was he doing this? The questions mounted, but the answers remained buried in the darkness from which the killer emerged. He was an enigma, a ghost stalking the quiet suburbs. The sense of security in communities like Vallejo, Benicia, and Napa, a feeling that had always been taken for granted, was gone. Doors were locked earlier. Parents kept their children closer. The friendly wave to a stranger turned into a suspicious glance. The very fabric of these small towns began to fray. The killer was more than a murderer. He was a force of terror, systematically dismantling trust across an entire region. He turned neighbors into strangers and safe havens into potential crime scenes. The fear was palpable, a heavy blanket of fog smothering the California dream. And then, the Phantom decided he wanted the world to know his name. He sent letters, almost identical, to 3 Bay Area newspapers. They began with a chilling declaration. "Dear editor, this is the murderer." In them, he took credit for the attacks and provided details only the killer could know. He gave himself a name that would become synonymous with unsolved mysteries and pure evil. He called himself the Zodiac. He wasn't just a killer, he was a performer who craved the spotlight. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted to be known. He wanted to taunt, to terrorize, and he wanted to play a twisted game with the police, the press, and the entire public. Each letter included part of a bizarre cipher which he claimed would reveal his identity. He demanded the papers publish it on their front page or he would go on a kill rampage. The Zodiac had made the entire Bay Area his hostage, and so began one of the most terrifying and baffling true crime stories in American history. A chilling open wound that continues to haunt us, even today. The nightmare began on a cold December night in 1968. In the small, tight-knit communities of Northern California, life still felt safe, insulated from the turmoil gripping the rest of the nation. But a shadow was creeping in, one that would forever shatter that sense of security. On a lonely stretch of Lake Herman Road, two high school students, 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, were on their very first date. David was a decorated Eagle Scout, Betty Lou a popular honor student. They were the kind of kids every parent dreams of, their whole lives stretching out before them. They were just kids, full of the innocent hope and excitement that comes with young love. They parked David's Rambler station wagon in a quiet gravel turnout, a well-known lover's lane. The spot's isolation was part of its appeal, a place to share a private moment under the stars, far from prying eyes. But their innocent date was about to turn into a bloodbath. The privacy they sought would become their undoing. Another car pulled up beside them, its headlights cutting through the darkness, pinning them in the sudden glare. A man stepped out, a gun in his hand. He was methodical, his movements deliberate as he ordered the young couple out of their car. What happened next, as pieced together by investigators, was swift and brutal. David Faraday was shot once in the head at point-blank range. As he fell, Betty Lou Jensen, terrified, tried to run for her life. She didn't get far. The killer shot her 5 times in the back. It was an execution, utterly without mercy. The killer's reign of terror had begun. The community was stunned into disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen here. It was a senseless act, a brutal double murder with no apparent reason, infecting the towns of Benicia and Vallejo with a fear they had never known. Police were baffled. At the scene, they found .22 caliber shell casings, but little else. There were no witnesses on the desolate road, no clear suspects, and no traditional motive like robbery. It was just cold-blooded murder, an act of violence so random it defied all logic. The killer had vanished as completely as if he were a ghost. For months, the case went cold. The town fell into a nervous quiet, the unsolved murders a constant, unspoken dread. Lovers' lanes emptied, but this was only the beginning. The killer was just getting started, patiently waiting. 7 months later, on a night of national celebration, the phantom struck again. On the 4th of July, 1969, as fireworks exploded across the sky, another young couple, 22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Michael Mago, were attacked in their car at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, just 4 miles from the first crime scene. Darlene, a vibrant young mother, died on her way to the hospital. But this time, there was a survivor. Michael Mago, despite being shot in the face, neck, and chest, lived to tell the tale. From his hospital bed, he gave police their first terrifying description of the attacker and the chilling sequence of events. He described a heavy-set man who approached their car, shining a powerful flashlight into their eyes to blind them. Without a word, he opened fire. After emptying his pistol, the man walked away. But when he heard Michael groan in pain, he came back and fired 2 more shots at each of them. The attack wasn't just vicious, it was inhumanly cold. The killer had returned, bolder and more brazen than before, and this time, he wouldn't just vanish into the night. He would announce himself to the world. Just before 12:40 a.m., less than an hour after the shooting, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. The dispatcher, Nancy Slover, picked up. The voice on the other end was calm, monotone, chilling. He spoke in a flat, almost robotic tone, as if reading from a script. "I wish to report a murder," he said. "No, a double murder." He then gave the location and added a final, horrifying detail. "I also killed those kids last year." He was taking credit not only for that night's attack, but for the Lake Herman Road murders. The caller was the killer himself, and he was playing a game. He wasn't just committing crimes, he was claiming them, taunting the very people hunting him. This phone call was a declaration. A new, terrifying chapter had begun. The phantom of Lake Herman Road now had a voice. Soon, he would have a name. The Zodiac was about to speak. The killer was not content with phone calls. He wanted a bigger stage. He wanted fame. On August 1st, 1969, 3 identical letters arrived at Bay Area newspapers. Each letter contained details only the killer could have known. He was proving he was the real deal, but the letters held something far more sinister. They included a chilling message and a direct demand. The killer was no longer just a murderer, he was a puppeteer. In his letters, he introduced a symbol, a circle with a cross through it. It became his trademark, a global symbol of fear. He demanded the papers publish his letters on front pages. If they refused, he'd go on a kill rampage. He promised to murder a dozen people over the weekend. The media and police were now caught in an impossible bind. They were being blackmailed by a serial killer, forced to play his sick public game. But the most disturbing part was the cipher. Each letter held 1/3 of a complex 408-symbol cryptogram. He brazenly claimed the code held his identity. He dared the entire world to unmask him, a direct challenge to law enforcement and the public. The message: I am smarter than you. You are powerless to stop me. The hunt became a public puzzle, a race against time to decipher a madman's message. The Bay Area was held hostage by riddles. The letters mixed boasts, threats, cryptic clues. He wrote with grammatical errors and misspellings. Yet the message showed terrifying intelligence and cunning. He turned murder into entertainment, a national spectacle watched in horror. The Zodiac wasn't just a killer of people. He was a killer of peace, a true master of psychological warfare, thriving on the fear he created. The game had begun. The rules were written in blood. As the Zodiac's body count grew, the police investigation became a frantic, sprawling manhunt. The Bay Area was gripped by fear, and thousands of tips poured in, threatening to drown detectives in a deluge of information. Complicating matters, the investigation spanned multiple jurisdictions. Each police department ran its own case, creating a disjointed effort where information wasn't shared effectively. The Zodiac, by design or luck, exploited this confusion to his full advantage. But amidst the chaos, one name consistently rose to the top of the suspect list: Arthur Lee Allen. A disgraced former teacher, the circumstantial evidence against him was incredibly compelling. He lived near the first attacks, owned a Zodiac brand watch, and most damningly, a friend claimed Allen had confessed his desire to hunt people and used the Zodiac symbol before the murders even began. Despite this mountain of circumstantial evidence, a prosecutable case never materialized. The physical evidence simply wasn't there. His fingerprints, palm print, and DNA did not match samples from the crime scenes. Handwriting analyses were inconclusive. Critically, a key survivor failed to identify Allen in a photo lineup, a devastating blow to the case against him. Arthur Lee Allen died in 1992, taking any secrets to his grave. He represents the ultimate frustration of the case, a prime suspect who fit the profile, yet against whom the evidence would never stick. But Allen was far from the only person of interest. The sprawling investigation looked at numerous individuals, each with their own set of tantalizing clues and frustrating dead ends. The Zodiac Killer became a dark icon of American pop culture. His theatrical crimes captured the public imagination, and the 1971 film featured a villain named Scorpio, directly based on the Zodiac. The case also had a profound impact on law enforcement. The Zodiac's ability to operate across jurisdictions exposed critical flaws in policing, and this failure directly influenced the development of programs like the FBI's VICAP, created to track violent serial offenders. Perhaps one of the Zodiac's most unique legacies is the rise of the amateur detective. By sending his ciphers not just to police but to newspapers, he invited the entire world to participate in the hunt. He was, in a sense, crowdsourcing his own investigation, creating a template for the countless online sleuths of the digital age. But this lack of resolution is a deep, unhealing wound for the families of the victims. For over half a century, they have been denied justice. While the world became fascinated with the puzzle, their loved ones, David, Betty Lou, Darlene, Cecilia, and Paul, are too often reduced to footnotes in the killer's story. For their families, the Zodiac isn't a myth. He is the man who murdered their loved ones and got away with it. In the modern era, the hunt has entered a new, technology-driven phase. Genetic genealogy offered tantalizing hope, but the DNA evidence is limited and possibly contaminated. Meanwhile, independent groups have made headlines claiming to have identified the Zodiac, but law enforcement remains publicly skeptical, citing a lack of conclusive evidence. Officially, the FBI still classifies the case as open. Ultimately, the Zodiac's most enduring legacy is the power of his own myth. He was more than a killer. He was an author for his own evil, creating a persona, a symbol, and infuriating puzzles that ensured he would never be forgotten. He became a modern boogeyman, a faceless phantom onto whom we project our fears. The Zodiac story is a chilling reminder that evil can strike from the shadows and then retreat back into them, leaving only pain and questions in its wake. Some monsters are destined to haunt us forever, their secrets taken to the grave.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share it with your friends.